How the Grinch Stole Christmas is one of the most well-loved and popular Christmas films of all time, and it's with good reason. It's got all the hallmarks of a great Christmas story. You've got a mean, cantankerous protagonist who learns from his nasty ways. You've got a happy and satisfying conclusion that wraps up the story in a nice Christmas bow. And you've got a wide variety of Dr. Seuss nonsense words. But how did this beloved story go from one of the most watched Christmas cartoons to an over-bloated live-action remake to the widely hated Illumination version? And lest we forget, that remake that feels like if Lifetime made a horror movie. Or in other words, what happened to the Grinch? Well, let's find out. It all started with the 1957 book by Dr. Seuss. The story was inspired by Dr. Seuss's own grief during the holiday season, as his wife had fallen ill and he found himself dismayed over the commercialization of Christmas, and how he felt like it had lost its true meaning. The first draft was pretty similar to what we ultimately got, the main difference being the title. Originally, the book was called The Hubbub and the Grinch. Now, when I say Dr. Seuss was very proud of himself for this book, I mean it. He loved this story so much that he even made his license plate read Grinch. Heartwarmingly enough, his wife actually did the same for her own car after his death. The story tells of a big green meanie who lives in a cave north of a town called Whoville, and he hates Christmas because his heart is too small. He gets furious every year because of all the noise of the singing and eating and present opening, and one year he decides to put an end to all that happy celebration and nonsense. So he makes a Santa suit and decides to go and steal all the presents and food from the villagers. Now, I admit this always confused me. Like, why do you need the Santa suit and the sleigh with the dog dressed as a reindeer? If you're planning to burglarize a bunch of houses, wouldn't it make more sense to wear dark clothes and not bright, attention-calling ones? I don't know, I'm overthinking this. So the Grinch goes and steals all the presents, and yes, he even steals the roast beast because he's a monster. But lo and behold, while he's robbing the first house, he gets interrupted by the sound of someone coming down the stairs. And it turned out to be... yeah, that's Cindy Lou Who. Not this, but this. You feel Mandela'd yet? So the Grinch makes up a story about why he's stealing the tree, and Cindy is off on her way. After he steals all the presents, the Grinch wants to hear all the villagers cry about how they don't have presents, but instead they sing anyway, because Christmas isn't about presents, it's about family. So the Grinch gives all the presents back, and the book ends extremely abruptly. Like, we don't even see him do any of that. We don't even get to see him go down the hill. He just changes his mind, and the book ends immediately after. The whole bit of him having to keep the sleigh from falling, that's entirely a product of the film version. And we'll see with that film, pretty much everything you remember about the Grinch is from that movie and not this book. And I mean literally almost everything. You can read this book free online if you don't believe me, but like every single popular aspect of the story comes from that and not from this. So there we have it, a nice brief little tale about goodwill towards men. Now, I'll admit that this story is basically just the exact same as A Christmas Carol and has pretty much an identical message, but I don't see that as a negative. After all, A Christmas Carol is my favorite Christmas movie by a long shot, but that's a video for another time. We'll get there, believe me. In 1966, 9 years after the book, the TV special arrived. Now, this one has earned its reputation for being one of the best animated TV specials of all time, and in my view, it's probably the most enjoyable 2D animated Christmas film. Clocking in at just 25 minutes, this special shows us that indeed less is more. The next shortest one on our list is 85 minutes, for reference. I love this movie. It has a gorgeous color palette. I especially love this scene with all the bright pink in the background. It's just great. And it was expensive, too. Reportedly, this film cost $300,000 to make, 4 times the cost of the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And adjusted for inflation, that's over $2.7 million. But now, since we already know the story and how it ends, I figured I'd use this opportunity to mention just the sheer amount that this movie changed from the book, and just how much of people's perception of this character comes from this movie. Like, for example, the fact that he's green, that's from this. In the book, he has white hair, since pretty much the only color in the book is his red suit, and that tuft of hair around his neck, that's from the movie too. We didn't have that in the book either. The fact that Cindy looks like this, and not like the Eraserhead monster, that's also from this movie. Even the fact that the Grinch is mean to his dog is mostly a construct of this film. The much more proper ending is something that I give huge props to this version for, because the original book literally just ends with saying, oh yeah, and then he changed his mind. So that's a welcome addition. All in all, pretty much every single aspect of this character was defined by this cartoon, and I don't mean to suggest that Dr. Seuss wasn't okay with these changes, seeing as he was a control freak beyond belief when it comes to his stories. See the Lorax video for context. And if that's not enough, he also wrote the screenplay for this film and composed the music, so it's a safe bet he was cool with the changes. Now obviously I have to mention the soundtrack, and I have to get my proper backlash for saying that for the most part I don't like it. The Grinch's theme is great, and we'll get back to that in a minute because I have a few things to say about it, but for the most part I don't like the music in this movie. It just sounds like a bunch of kids rambling and yelling out of tune, and it makes me feel like the Grinch to listen to it. But as for that song, you know the one. Well, here's a fun fact for you. You know how Boris Karloff voiced the Grinch? Well, if you didn't, you do now. Well, he's also the narrator, but what you might not know is that he actually did not sing this song. It's a very common misconception. It was actually Tony the Tiger. I'm not kidding. It was Thurl Ravenscroft, TV voice actor and presumably World of Warcraft wizard. But yeah, that's Tony the Tiger. But there's more in regards to the soundtrack. That song Fahu Forze? That's not Latin. Not at all. A bunch of people actually wrote to the studio asking for a translation from Latin to English, but no such thing is necessary because it's sung in a made-up language. All in all, there's not much to say about this film. It had a pretty boringly straightforward production, and I sure couldn't find anything all that interesting to say on that front. Unless you want to know outstanding trivia like how Cindy was modeled after Chuck Jones' granddaughter. It's boring. Okay, so now let's move on to the live action. Ha! Not so fast. Oh, what? You thought that was the only Grinch story that Dr. Seuss made into a movie? You think the Grinch just stole Christmas? Oh no, baby, he's back for more, and he's stealing Halloween this time. I wouldn't begrudge you for not knowing this, but Dr. Seuss made a sequel that was also made into a movie about the Grinch. And I'll bet you all thought I wasn't going to mention that, didn't you? That's right, there's a Halloween special. It's called Halloween is Grinch Night. That's not the best title. This one was made 11 years after the first movie and is 100% authentic, written by the man himself. Its listed genre is horror, and so turns out the mean one wasn't as original as I thought. In terms of production, Thurl returned as a singer for the movie, but the Grinch's voice actor is different this time. Boris Karloff was busy being dead, and so the job fell to Hans Conried instead. This movie is odd. It honestly feels like someone who's making fun of Dr. Seuss and not a story written by him.
'Cause when old Punker's Pond gets grunkled by that howlin' and that growlin', that always disturbs the hackin' cracks.
Okay, so we start off in Whoville with a bunch of people playing around outside, but then the villagers smell sweet and sour sauce or something. I'm not kidding, by the way. And so they get scared and go into hiding. I just have to mention the noise that this kid makes when he gets picked up, by the way, because how could I not? So, because Punker's Pond got grunkled by the Gree-Grumps who startled the Hackin' Cracks, the Grinch wakes up and decides to do something bad, and we don't find out what it is yet. So this family decides to call the Grinch hotline, but the phones are out so they can't. Euchariah, that's this kid, decides to leave to go to the euphemism, and no, we never find out where or what that is, and he stumbles on the Grinch, who's headed off to do something bad. The Grinch decides to prove that he is in fact the Grinch to the kid, because I guess he didn't believe him, and he does this by making his eyebrows fly off of his head. He then sings a 20-second song before abruptly stopping and leaving. Euchariah chases him and distracts him by asking the Grinch to scare him, and the Grinch does so by throwing him into a vat of green ooze that teleports him to another dimension where he gets tormented by whatever these things are. There's a giant lobster, there's a big balloon. I don't even know what to say about this, to be honest with you. But then the wind stops, and so the Grinch leaves. And then Max goes with the kid, and that is the end of the movie. I have quite a bit to say about this. Okay, so first of all, I don't know why just because the wind stopped blowing that means the Grinch can't do whatever bad thing he was going to do. We never actually find out what he wanted. But then we've also got a few things to mention in general about this. I just want you to watch this, please.
Until finally Euchariah said,
Grandpa Josiah?
And Grandpa Josiah said, "Yes, Euchariah?" And Euchariah said,
Yeah, I get it. He said, and then he said, and he said too. Also, the sound mixing is awful in this movie. Like, there's a few times where you can't even hear the dialogue because the sound effects and music are so loud. Also, this movie's soundtrack is extremely grating. I can't tell you how much I wanted to just skip these songs because they are awful. But the continuity here is also complete nonsense. If this takes place before the first movie, then why did Max leave at the end? That wouldn't make any sense because he's still there with the Grinch when we see him in the movie. And if this takes place after, then why is the Grinch the bad guy again? I don't get it. Oh, Max talks in the movie too, so there's that. Anyway, I thought you all just might find this little blurb interesting. I don't know, maybe not. I know that there's at least a few of you that wouldn't let me live it down if I didn't include this film, so there it is. Okay, so now it's time to go from animation to live action. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, yeah, they called it the same thing again, was released in 2000 and stars Jim Carrey. Now, I love Jim Carrey. He's probably my favorite comedian of all time, and he's one of the few actors who has only gotten better over time. The man has an uncanny ability to be charismatic even when he's supposed to be playing unlikable characters. But in this movie, he's weighed down in 100 pounds of makeup, and his natural charm just can't get through it. It's not the worst movie on this list, but it's not good. With that said, there's a few funny lines here and there that did manage to get a few smiles from me, but that's also probably primarily just because I like Jim Carrey. Okay, in this movie, they had to ask the question of how do we pad out an hour and 45 minutes of film when the original was, 25? And that movie still had to add a few extra scenes just to get to that runtime. Well, the solution was to add a subplot about the mayor, and a subplot about Cindy wanting to make the Grinch a good guy, and a subplot about the Grinch being adopted, and a subplot about the Grinch being in love. And by the end of it, you look back and you have to ask yourself, does this have anything to do with the original story anymore? Like, it's pretty straightforward in the first one. I honestly don't even want to have to go through this entire plot, just meticulously recant each and every dumb thing that happens, so I won't. But I will say that this movie goes so far off in the weeds that it just kind of ceases to even be recognizable anymore as having anything to do with the book that it's based off of. Oh, Anthony Hopkins narrates this movie, by the way. That's delightful. This movie honestly gives me flashbacks to the Cat in the Hat movie with Mike Myers. It's not a good thing. Okay, so to recap on this story as quickly as I can do, Cindy meets the Grinch while he's going around being evil, and he throws her into a present sorting machine, presumably with the intent to kill her, but she still thinks for some reason that people are mistaken about him being a bad guy, so she researches his past and finds out that he was an orphan who was bullied by Mayhew, who becomes the mayor, and then he fell in love with Martha, a girl in his class, but Mayhew says that he's growing a beard, and so the Grinch decides to shave it, and while he's shaving, he cuts his face, and then everybody at school laughs at him. And that's why he's evil, I guess. I don't understand. And I definitely don't get why it would convince you to spend the rest of your life being a total psycho who throws children into industrial machines to murder them. But then Cindy invites the Grinch to Christmas, and he goes to the town, only to find out that Martha's married to Mayhew. So he burns down the tree, and then he decides to steal all the Christmas presents. The ending is basically the same, only this time the Grinch marries Martha in the end. I'm not a fan. I don't like it. Alright, now it's time for me to reveal my bias. This movie was mean to Jim Carrey, so I don't like it. The suit they put him in was apparently so painful and suffocating to wear that he ended up having to consult with a member of the CIA to learn torture-resistant mental techniques just to get through it. This hideous suit was made from dyed green yak fur and rubber and apparently felt like being buried alive to wear. It was so uncomfortable and maddeningly hot that Jim kicked a hole in the wall of his trailer over frustration with the costume. And shame upon you, Ron Howard. You ruined my ability to enjoy your film by torturing my favorite actor. This film must have messed with his head big time too, because apparently at one point Jim ran out into the back lot of the studio and menaced a group of tourists with a knife during filming. I have no further context for this, by the way, but it did happen. Oh, and on top of having to wear an itchy, tight, suffocating, boiling hot suit, Jim also had to wear contact lenses that burned his eyes and also had to deal with getting fake snow blown into them constantly. I guess Ron Howard did put the suit on himself to show appreciation for Jim putting up with wearing it for so long, but funny enough, Jim thought that Ron was a stunt double and got mad because he didn't look like him. And now that I have admonished this film for being mean to Jim Carrey, I have to admonish Jim Carrey for being mean to this film. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim, but from what I've heard about this set, well, if it's true, you also deserve a bit of the heat. According to the makeup artist Kazu Hiro, Jim was extremely rude and mean to him on set and spoke to him in a very aggressive and dismissive way. He would also rip the makeup off after several hours of the makeup artist applying it, which would cost the studio entire days worth of shooting. I love you, Jim, but don't be mean to people. That's never cool. Well, just a few other things to mention about this film. It holds the world record for most actors in makeup in a single production, so that's something. It's also funny that Jim Carrey has now played 2 different Christmas-hating protagonists. You know, I mentioned this movie's like the same thing as A Christmas Carol. Well, it's just a fun coincidence that he played both Scrooge and the Grinch. I feel like the mood is sad now. It's time to move on. How fun is it that 2 What Happened To videos ended up featuring Illumination? Let's see if they got this one right. Well, this one is just... Well, let's see what it is. Okay, so you know how I said earlier that the live-action movie went off the rails with its need to add in a bunch of subplots? Well, this one does that too, but in a slightly different way. So we start off with Cindy's overworked mother, because Whoville is no longer an idyllic, happy village anymore, and Cindy decides that she's going to go and send a letter to Santa. She runs into the Grinch, and he makes a sarcastic remark that she takes seriously, and this convinces her to go to the North Pole to deliver her letter in person. When she realizes that this isn't reasonable, she decides to go full-on Nightmare Before Christmas and just kidnap Santa instead. And then the Grinch decides to steal Christmas. Why does he want that? I don't know, but he's also an orphan in this one too. I appreciate the idea that being an orphan makes you evil. Like, this is a weirdly common trope, and you'll notice it now that I've pointed it out. The rest of the story plays out pretty much how you'd expect. The only difference is that the Grinch goes to Cindy's house instead of a citywide affair at the end. This movie is a different animal from the Lorax. At least I had things to say about the Lorax. This movie is just a waste of time. Like, it's as if Air could be a movie. It's never good. It never really dips into being outright bad. They redid the Grinch's theme song, this time as a rap song, and it really doesn't work. I love rap music, but this one's pretty lame. It was written by Danny Elfman, which, I don't know. I didn't realize that he could make bad music, so I hate this movie for that revelation. And I can't play any of it because I'll get copyrighted. It also is narrated by Pharrell, so that's something. I'm kind of at a loss here for words. This film is the worst kind of bad, like it's just nothing. Just like every other Illumination film, it's just noise with nothing to offer outside of eye-rolling jokes and the same exact look that every other movie they've ever made has. It's often said that being boring is the worst sin a film can commit, and this film has most assuredly committed it. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. Yeah, I know I gotta talk about the stupid horror movie, The Mean One. Let's get this over with. The Mean One is the worst movie I've seen this entire year. Do you think The Grinch is scary? No. Neither does anybody else, so why did they make this movie? It's like that Winnie the Pooh horror movie. Ooh, aren't you scared? Isn't this the most horrifying thing you've ever seen? No. This is a buddy. Not only is this movie not scary, I mean, this movie is not a horror comedy either. Like, it's supposed to be scary. But it also has the worst acting I have ever seen in my entire life. Battlefield Earth, eat your heart out. This film is so awful that it makes me angry. The acting is so bad that I don't have anything to compare it to. Maybe Doug Walker's movies? Those are on par with this one, but also this film isn't even fun. Like, most horror movies have some fun bloody death scenes or a cool monster, but not this one. The monster isn't even scary, and the kills are lame. I swear he kills every single person in this movie by bonking them on the head. Like, he'll hit their head on the wall, or hit their head on the counter, or just hit them on the head. It's very repetitive, it's extremely boring, and it just sucks. Okay, so you want to know how this movie ends? Well, I'm going to tell you. So in the beginning of the movie, the Grinch comes and kills Cindy's family, and then she gives him a necklace. And then decades after wantonly murdering people at random, Cindy sees that he's still wearing her necklace, and he gets reformed, and then he dies. And, okay, I need you to understand this is real, alright? At the end of the movie, the Grinch becomes a TikTok craze, and a bunch of people go and search for him out in the woods like he's Bigfoot or something for clout. And that's the end. Don't waste your time on this. But now it's time to answer the question once and for all. What happened to the Grinch? I think the story of this character is one of pure marketing. Since he's such an iconic character, studios know that he'll sell tickets, and they can put any script in front of him and it'll garner attention. Ultimately, he's just used to get you to go out and see movies that otherwise you wouldn't have, and all too late you'll realize that you paid for something that you're not going to get. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be releasing the other one that I've been trying to get out for a while now as soon as I can, and I'll be reviewing the new Wednesday show pretty soon too. I really hope this video is out by Christmas. Hope you're watching this on Christmas Day, because let me tell you, this video was probably the greatest nightmare that I have ever made. And that's saying something, because I've had videos that I had lost literally the entire draft twice, and this one just takes the cake. I have never had a more nightmarish experience making a video in my entire life than this. This video has kept me awake for far too long and for far too many days. This was supposed to be out December 10th, by the way, for reference. But, well, as you can see, that didn't happen. I know this one in particular was like a little less information heavy and a little more comedy centric, but that's also because, unfortunately, there was not a lot to say about the most recent stuff, and I couldn't find a whole lot of fascinating trivia or behind the scenes stuff about this particular series, but I still felt like it was worthy of making one of these on. In any case, like the video if you liked it, or dislike the video if you didn't like it, and subscribe for more. That's all for now.